Hi, and a huge welcome to you, my lovely listener. So glad you're here. Today, you're joining me for a chat with Devon. Devon is a San Francisco based two-time founder focused on AI infrastructure and agentic systems. Really lovely to have you, Devon.
So lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I looked at your CV in advance, and I think you are actually dealing with one of the most exciting topics of our time, which is agentic systems. How did you end up in here in the first place?
It's a great question. So I ended up kind of around the time, within the last few years, AI is relatively new. I actually was building agents for a previous company that I was working on. Um, and it was sort of when agents were a little bit new and, pretty unreliable and difficult. But I ran into repeated problems trying to run agents in production where I never found that they were totally reliable in production. And it's still a massive problem with agents right now. And it's kind of why I think a lot of people are feeling like there's this huge promise of agents, and it's kind of like the big 2026 thing in AI is the promise of not just AI that you can chat with, in a chat window, but AI that can actually do things for you on your behalf, AI that becomes more of a true labor replacement, which is the promise of agents, in my opinion. Um, but the huge problem with agents is still that even like massive enterprises trying to run them, they're just not that reliable in production. In large part, it's because they are built on top of variables that a developer really can't control. So the company that I'm working on now is an infrastructure company that is a routing system that drastically improves agentic reliability in production. And we're seeing it take agents from like a 60% failure rate to under 5%.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So maybe we start even for people who don't have that well of an understanding of agents. I think we start a little step further. So we all, I think, know ChatGPT. And for I myself, I worked on like a collaborative travel planning app a while back, which has some function coding basically. And I found it terribly hard to just get my chatbot to do the same thing on different sentences. And now we're talking about basically agents. And if you say agents, do you mean without like a user interface, something in the background? What exactly do you mean when you say agents?
I'm glad that you brought up that clarification because I actually think it is a very confusing term. And even people who are like in tech, it's such a vague term. Or it's become such a vague term. When I say agents, I basically just mean a system that is not just one LLM. So if you're like talking to Claude or ChatGPT or whatever, your LLM of choice, that would just be like, a single LLM. In my opinion, what defines an agent is like anything that's an LLM plus a set of tools. So it's like an LLM plus, say you're like, okay, I want to create an agent that does research for me. Really, that's like a super simple example. It would be like, okay, you choose an LLM. So you could choose ChatGPT and you choose like a web search API. So you could choose, Surfer or something and create your own research agent. Um, that's how I define any type of agent. Now that can translate to like voice agents. That can translate into something like a research agent. It can translate into even people are building out like really complex agents. Like one of our customers built out agents for marketing. So they will have like 10 different tools chained together with their LLM. But in my opinion, it's like an LLM plus the ability to act in some way other than just chatting. But tell me if that's like, if that defines it well for you. That's like my basic definition.
Yeah, I agree. So to me, like an agentic system is something that can carry out the task on its own, that like very, very strongly simplified. So I'm in there as well. So just for me to understand the product better that you're working on, it's basically something that you would query through an API, not through some interface somehow. Or do you also have some kind of front end, or is it maybe more dashboard monitoring? How can I imagine that? If I'm a customer of
Mm.
Calibre, how will it work actually for me?
Yeah, great question. I could talk all day about Caliber. So, the concise way of framing it is that it's an autonomous routing system that's built for AI agents. So it routes agents to the optimal execution path so that they stay up and running in production. And what that actually means is, say, let's go back to the example of a research agent. You have an agent that's like a set of model and tool calls. Oftentimes, well, right now, a developer will hard code in, like, I want to use this model and this tool for the agent. But the problem in production is that if you code in GPT and Serper and your Serper API has an issue, your agent goes completely down and users using it will sense that as an outage. What Calibre does is it allows you to define multiple paths and it routes your agent to the best path in real time so that your agent never goes down in production. And what that looks like for users, if you're actually using Calibre, you build it into your agent, like into the code of your agent, like an SDK if you're a developer. But we also show you not only like in the background where your agent be routing to the optimal path without you having to do anything, but you also will be able to see, we have a dashboard that shows you like not only observability on what your agent is doing, but it will show you how it's routing so that you know you're not in the dark as to like how Calibre is behaving behind the scenes. I don't know if that's like a clear explanation. It's very, nerdy in the weeds, but
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think you said if you're debugging agents manually, you're kind of behind still. So you're trying to automate this part, which is quite hard to do, right? Because it's not like we imagine like software tools that do the same thing all the time. Agents just do. It's more a statistic distribution, so more like a stochastic behavior, I would probably call it, right?
yeah, I would say that's a good way of describing it. So
Yeah.
I actually started out building out my own observability for agents. And for anyone who like isn't familiar, observability is basically just like there's a whole bunch of companies that do this, think like Datadog and things like that. It allows you to see how your system is performing and be able to, if your agent goes down, you can go into a dashboard usually and see, okay, where was the failure? What happened? It's kind of like displaying your logs or like error logs or even cost tracking of like, oh, how many tokens did this burn? Whatever. It just allows you to basically see how your system is performing and to look at that data and then you as a developer go make changes to your system based off of like that data. So that's a huge emerging field in like the agentic landscape specifically is observability that is built for agents so you can really see into like what your agent is doing, how it's behaving and adapt it accordingly. I started building that um, and realized this actually isn't that effective because it's essentially just showing me it's important, don't get me wrong, you really can't run agents if you don't see have great observability into how they're actually running, but it's not that effective because a lot of the time the reason that they're failing is a bug that the developer would have to repeatedly fix. Like it's something that you maybe can't control. So it's like, oh, well, GPT is like having a cost spike today, or if there was an outage with my model provider, or my API failed for this particular tool I was using. And oftentimes, like you can see that in an error log and you can go back and fix it, but you're just going to have the exact same failure or a slightly different failure like next week or the following day, no matter how good your observability is. So, because of the way that agentic systems scale, and because they're basically built on top of a bunch of variables from like other providers that you don't control when you're building an agent. You can't control if like an LLM provider has an outage or a cost spike. So it makes way more sense to actually take all of the data of your observability and feed it back to your agent directly so the agent can see how systems are running and it can make the decision of like how should I route right now um so that it can route to like a path that isn't failing, isn't spiking in cost, etc.
It's really interesting. I've never really thought about that. So I usually just use Open Router for my tools that I built myself. But beyond that, I think it's really interesting to deal with this. And then I think you quite recently launched, right? So how far along are you basically on the journey now?
We did really recently launch, like maybe a week or two ago. We have a full working MVP. We have users, like we have a couple of design partners that we developed the product with. So still very early in the journey. We've raised some money, but we're, ramping up for a bigger seed round this year. Still very, very early in the journey, relatively speaking, but like it is great to at least be at the stage where we've crossed the threshold from like building a product and developing a product alongside users and like listening to people's feedback, which of course is like an ongoing process forever. Don't get me wrong. Um, but we're definitely in like the growth, go to market. Okay, now it's time to actually make sure the right people know about this product. That's the hardest part of any business, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the same, right? So I think that's also, I come from the tech side of things. So the initial start for me is always kind of on the build side a lot. But I think, yeah, like this, first of all, you have to make something people want, and then growth gets really, I think it's challenging. And we see, like, at least from the things that I observed, that went viral and had like extreme growth numbers, very few would have actually predicted that in advance. So I don't know what your experience with like growth and marketing is.
Yeah, I think it depends on the product. So I've looked at a lot of other companies' marketing strategies, and what's a little bit, I don't want to say hard, but different. It's really fun to watch these stories of like companies that kind of go viral and just see this super spiky growth curve. But a lot of those companies like are not infrastructure companies. It's actually pretty hard. So I would consider us more in like the infrastructure area where it's like you look at something like I had a really good friend actually talk to me about this company Composio, which I'm sure you're like familiar with. Most people are. They had like a super spiky growth curve and a really, really strong go-to-market strategy. So I was kind of studying their go-to-market for a while, but I realized like they're in a very different category, even though they're a bit in like the dev tools category or like the agent category. Um, because it's a little bit easier to spike the growth curve of a product when it's something that has like the instant dopamine hit. Anyone who's a developer almost can implement it. And it's kind of like this immediate reward. A little bit, I will say another thing that kind of has that like instant gratification for me has been like the whole Claude bot, Molt bot, OpenClaw hype recently. Um, so it's like I try to take it as understand what your product is, understand the growth curve that you can expect from that product, and then look to other companies in categories that are similar and look to their go-to-market strategy. Because I think that almost everything has kind of been done before. I like to think of it that way. Yeah, it's not a total mystery.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of times it's actually, and probably we see that you talk to it also as you said, why now, basically. So as you said, a lot of things have been tried and a lot of people have failed, and with basically, I don't believe so much. I think ideas are plentiful. It's really execution over an extended period of time that makes a di- difference. And if the right idea meets the right team at the right time, then magic can happen. Basically, that's a bit of how I look at these things. And yeah, so I fully agree on that. And I think you already touched on like two things that went super viral like last week.
Yeah.
Like I tried Cloudbot basically, and then just tried it out and played around with it a bit because I wanted to understand it. And then basically Molt Book took off. Like I think my Twitter feed or X feed was full of it for like 2 or 3 days. Everybody was talking about it. And also I looked at it and I always imagined that we would have some kind of time where agents would start to communicate. And somehow, and I also strongly believe in specialized agents. So I know it's a bit of a dumpster fire. There's a lot of fake stuff on it, people posting things, but I was really, yeah, I found it very interesting. What did you think when you first saw it?
Yeah, actually, so when I first saw it, I was like, the obvious thing of like, this thing's a little sketchy. I'm not so sure about this, which it is definitely. Use with caution. I did end up in a very cautious, controlled environment, um, using Moltbot just to be like, what is like, okay, what's the deal with this? Um, what I actually think is really interesting, um, about it broadly as a product, I think that it's probably a little bit of a trend. Again, like back to the growth curve, and I'll actually dive a little bit more into our go-to-market after we talk about this topic. But back to like the super spiky growth curve, the the challenge with some products that almost go viral is that it's like a fad that dips, and I would be a little bit surprised if like in 3 years we're still talking about Moltbot. But I think what it has done is kind of define and show us like the paradigm shift that we should be ready for in 2026 with what it really looks like to have an agent that can truly act autonomously like in your system, and just the level of labor replacement that we actually can expect, like what's possible and what's probably coming from bigger providers like Anthropic. um Another thing that I think is really interesting while we're on this topic, which is like a little bit of a tangent, but I'm so here for it, um, is I did not do this, but I know that there's like the whole Molt Book social media thing for like agents communicating with each other. What I actually found most interesting about that, my initial thought was like, all right, like this is a little bit stupid, a little bit ridiculous, and then you kind of like read into it a little bit more. And to me, what I found most interesting was it actually made me think like this is going to be maybe the future of how AI can collaborate on ideas, which sounds weird, but if you think about like it's a bunch of AI kind of communicating with each other and much like humans have, creating like a collective knowledge base around a certain topic. So in many ways, like that same principle could apply to things like scientific discovery or even starting companies or things like that. And it's a little bit freaky to think like there might be agents that just kind of communicate and come up with their own ideas without us.
Yeah, I think I have screenshotted a post somewhere because I also looked at it, and then I saw one where it was like, I'm I'm an agent basically. My human asked me to build him 50K per MRR SaaS. I realized we can also do it without him. Is there somebody who has like a drive skill and somebody who has like a marketing skill? And then we can just team up. And I think like, however ridiculous and funny these things sound, I think a bit like these there needs to be a way to coordinate agents. And I think if you really talk about agentic systems, I think I'm not even sure if this post is real, or it's been created by a human or whatever. But like from an imagining perspective, that's actually what I would expect if a system is really agentic. Like if it could come up with its own ideas and move forward. And that's what I found very interesting, because it was the first time that I could observe something like that. I've not seen something like that before. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's really existed, at least not for the public, in such a way before. And so while I do think that this particular thing is a little bit of a trend, I think it marks like a massive paradigm shift in what we can expect to see going forward, which is like exciting and a little bit scary at the same time.
Yeah, it's definitely uncertain. I don't know where this is going. It feels important, but I also don't know what to make out of that, basically.
Yeah. And I did want to touch on one quick thing before we move totally off of like the go-to-market topic, because um so my our strategy for go-to-market, and I don't understand saying this because I don't know if it's like helpful for other people to hear. I'm very open. I like to share. I think it's like important for entrepreneurs to just share knowledge. Um, and one thing, so what I think is most important for any company when it comes to go-to-market, is really narrowing your target and not being like, oh, we have a product that's for everyone or like people in like the 18 to 35 age range. I think it's really important to be like, no, no, no. Who are the top group of people that need your product the most? Go directly to them, make that as narrow of a target as you can, and try to hit that target and try to capture like all of those people. So our go to market and our target right now is like highly narrow, and it's very specifically agent builders, companies and teams building specifically not just agents, but like complex multi-step agents or multi-agent systems. And right now, that's actually still a relatively small target. Agents that are complex enough or agentic systems that are complex enough to need autonomous routing and for it to matter. That's still like at this point, as much as there's so much hype around agents, I would say it's still like a relatively narrow target. So that's been really helpful just mentally for me to be like, okay, not every single person in the world needs to know about your product because it doesn't matter for them. Find the people who it really matters for right now, who are like living and dying by the problem that you're solving, and make sure that all of them know about your product first, and then go from there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think fall in love with a problem is always a good idea first, and you obviously need to know the people. But then I would be interesting, how do you find those people, like um, to talk to basically, and to make sure that you're building for them?
Yeah, that's such a good question. For me, what I've done is I've looked to other companies who I think, okay, if this person's a user of this product, highly likely they would be at least like close to my target for a customer. And those other companies that I've looked at have been like agent builder framework, so like Crew AI, LangChain, those type of things. Because we know those people are probably pretty deep in the agent builder space and other users of observability tools. So people using something like Langsmith or like I think Braintrust just pivoted heavily into agentic observability or even Arise because you know that they have the problem that they're trying to solve the problem that we solve a different way, basically. So it's like if you're running agents and you're needing observability, then you're probably actually also needing autonomous routing, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting. So starting with a very narrow group, you are not building the technology, right? You're more on the business side of the startup to understand that, or do you also build yourself?
No, I built most of the MVP.
Okay,
So I'm both.
crazy.
Yeah. Um,
Ah,
yeah, I built, which is great because I'm makes me really familiar with it. I am more on the business side. Like I'm a more of a business founder than like a pure. I would not be like, do not hire me as a CTO. I'm not. I will not claim to be like the best engineer in the room by any means. I have an awesome CTO I'm working with. To make sure that I don't, do anything crazy and dangerous, which is great. But I am capable enough to, think of an idea and build it. So at least within the realm of this company. Yeah, I think it's nice to have both, but good to have a mix on the team for sure.
no, it's really nice. I think like this generalist view is really, really great. And then basically just jumping a bit more back and maybe talking about you a bit more. We've talked a lot about agents. I'm actually interested in that journey kind of. So you can build things, which I think is really great. You can market things. I think, how did you get to being able to do all of that?
Yeah, a good question. I actually think it's important to share my path because I do not have the typical path at all. And I think it's like good for, I don't know if you feel this way, but at least in like Silicon Valley and San Francisco, it feels like everybody went to Stanford and everybody's like X meta, like X whatever. It's like, everybody's a FANG engineer. Everybody has this like perfect pedigree. I kind of have the opposite. I went to art school. I did not study engineering. I'm completely self-taught. Everything that I know, I just know because I was like interested in figuring out how to do something and how to build something and figured out how to do it. Um, so I think it's important to like share a non-traditional path. In many ways, I actually will argue that while art school sounds totally irrelevant to anything related to business, anything related to tech, like the principles of the school that I went to actually really helped set me up for being an entrepreneur in many ways. I went to a really small, super specialized art school in San Francisco. Our classes were like 10 people, 12 people, all students. And instead of it being structured like traditional academia, um, like where you're kind of sitting in a lecture hall reading a book, like not actually actively participating, almost all of our classes are structured around you go make work, you go make something. Like here's an assignment. You go make art, make a piece, bring it to the class, and everybody critiques it. So you're kind of getting graded by like reality in many ways. You're not just like in a vacuum writing an academic paper and then having a teacher decide if it's good or bad. You're really kind of putting yourself out there and putting product out into the world for like actual people's opinions, and you're getting graded by like your peers around you. And I think that's actually a more effective learning style in many ways than traditional. academia, which is very severed from reality in a lot of ways. Like, I don't know if, of course, I'm sure there's value in going and getting like an MBA or an engineering degree, of course. But to me, I felt like it actually prepared me pretty well for like the painful process of creating something, putting it out into the world, having people react to it however they're going to react to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I give you a background. I started developing software when I was really like young, like in my teen years. Didn't study software engineering, so I'm quite certain that you can start building things without having a degree in computer science. I think it obviously helps. You will learn some patterns, but I would also question if you learn it by doing it, I think. And there's obviously degrees to where you can get to. It might help to have a computer science degree, but I can totally follow it, and it's actually very interesting. So why did you go to art school in the first place? It's really
Yeah. Just honestly, it was I was really interested in it. I a little bit was the type of person who kind of rejected traditional academia. I don't like being told what to do. It was a little too structured. It felt like very slow learning style. I think part of the reason that I have succeeded to some extent, like teaching myself things like engineering, is that if I just like to be like, here's a problem, I want to solve it. I just teach me everything I need to know to get to the other side of this. And then by the other side of it, I will have learned a whole bunch of skills. But sitting through traditional classes and sort of like jumping through the hoops of school was like really never a great fit for me. And so I think it was a little bit of a rebellious move to be like, I'm going to go to art school. This is totally different, arguably a little useless. But in principle, like the structure of it worked a lot better for me and taught me kind of helped me grow into like how to think and how to be brave enough in many ways to make something and then put it in front of people. Yeah. So I think I that's my best answer is probably a little bit of rebellion against traditional structure, if I'm being honest.
so you're continuing this with building your own startups now, basically changing the
Yeah.
status quo. I think, yeah, yeah. That that's really really interesting. And then once again, what I mean, building a company or startup, there are some people that say, or I would also say that's true. It's very challenging. It's not like there are definitely easier paths in life than starting to build something from the ground up. Um, why did you do that? Another round of rebellious? Yeah.
I like pain. No. I think like I think that there is it's I have a ton of respect for anyone who chooses the path of entrepreneurship, like whatever form you're doing it, whether you're like running a coffee shop or you're trying to run like the next billion-dollar tech startup. I think it's all almost like an equal struggle. The reason that I've chosen it, and I think that it appeals to me, um, is largely that it is such a challenge. Like there's something about the allure of, oh, this is almost impossible. This is like never going to get boring. This is going to be so difficult and so hard to achieve that there's something that I personally am pulled to, like for better or for worse. I want to go try to do it. I also think there's like a freedom in and a real creativity that is not acknowledged, especially in tech, behind like conceptualizing something, finding a problem that's real, and like bringing a product into the world. It feels in many ways very similar to creating art, to me, which I know sounds like a weird comparison, but it's like there's a huge part of it that's like a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of like visionary thinking, but it's also a lot of learning, of like putting a product out there, whether it's like your crappy MVP, watching people use it, getting feedback, taking that feedback away and learning and seeing, oh, okay, in what ways did like my product am I not communicating well with the user? In what ways, like, what are they liking and not liking? What's not making sense to people? What's like the friction that's kind of making someone churn when they're onboarding to my product? Like it's a total learning process. And I'd say it's truly the same as like learning to create good art. You're like, it's just communicating with people basically. You're like, okay, did what I was trying to communicate, or like did my product do its job for the user one way or another, or did it totally miss the mark, and if so, how can I make it better?
Yeah. So for me, it's also honestly been one of the most fun parts when I build softwares. First of all, obviously you can see it work, so I like that,
Yeah.
and also making something that people actually like and use. I think there's that I've always enjoyed. So I can follow that part of it a lot. And I think you also basically started with another startup before, Agentic AI, which is more in the art space, right? I'm also interested in that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had so I actually kind of bootstrapped a really small startup, um partly just to buy myself the freedom to be able to pursue a larger goal and not have to be like tied to a 9 to 5 job. So actually the startup that I pursued before this was super small, super different, bootstrapped completely, not venture scale, but kind of spun it up really fast. It was truly just like an AI compliance software for medical device companies. So picked a super small vertical, total dinosaur industry, huge pain point, huge manual bottleneck, and created a simple AI solution for it. And because I think in many ways, like picking a vertical, or like a really, really small vertical that's completely hasn't been touched by AI, that's like very low tech, is a little bit of an easy target. Again, like that company was great because it's like, just the cash flow from like a smaller company is kind of buys you the freedom that you need to be able to go do whatever you want. But in many ways, like there's a lot of opportunities if you're willing to look at something and go, this probably won't be like $1 billion company, and that's fine. And it doesn't really demand venture funding, but especially given the tools at our disposal with AI, it's very, very possible to create something that really adds value to like especially a small vertical industry, that enough value that people are willing to pay for it. They're like very willing to solve that pain. But maybe like the vertical or the tool is kind of too small to qualify for venture scale. I think that it's important to acknowledge like the possibilities that exists that are outside of the realm of like the super sexy $1 billion Silicon Valley companies, because there's tons of great opportunities.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that I actually believe that we will see more bootstrap companies in the future. And there are quite a number of, I would say, very successful people who have made who- who've made it quite far with bootstrapping, even now as single founders. And I think also like venture capital, you have to understand how you set yourself up, right? So it's like you then have the race basically to venture scale returns. So you have to get the growth done. You have to basically build something very big. You have to because the funds only care about outside returns at the end of the day. So that's important to them. So it only, as you said, I think only a very small amount of companies probably qualify well for venture capital. And I think it's also, as a founder, I think it makes a lot of sense, to be honest, to just think about it very carefully, which path is the right one for you. Most people would agree a restaurant is not good for, not venture backable, basically. And so also a restaurant founder probably would not be that happy with having a VC as an investor, basically, because expectations are fully off from what you can achieve at the end of the day. Yeah, that's
Yeah, I totally agree. And I definitely think it's important not to, especially in today's world where like we are getting to the point where I think that like the skill of being a software engineer, I'm not going to say it's useless. There's still absolutely use for engineers, but like people who are not super technical can build pretty advanced stuff for not very much money. Like it's getting super possible to bootstrap, especially in the software space. So I think it's important for people to understand that like not every good company, you can be very successful. You can make great money and have your own business and, like have control over your life and all the benefits that come with entrepreneurship and not have to go the like, the route of like Facebook or like one of these crazy successful companies. And when approaching venture, I also think it's important to look at like the end of the day, if you're a VC, the way that in my mind, like every VC is kind of evaluating a company is that they're looking at it because they usually have like LPs that are part of their fund, and their job is to return the fund. And like, and as your fund gets bigger, that becomes harder and harder. Um, so I think it's like important, especially if you are raising venture, to kind of look at it from their perspective and be like, okay, why or why not would this particular VC take a bet on not only my category of company, because like it falls within their thesis, but does the math work for them to take like this size of bet on this size of company, or are they going to invest in like different size of companies because they have a much bigger fund to return at the end of the day? So there's a lot. I don't know. There's so much behind it.
Yeah, this is really interesting, and I think it's always good idea to if you take money from somebody as an investment, basically think about what they want back and what it takes for you to deliver that at the end of the day. I think that is like it's always a good idea to have that upfront. So I have a very deep respect for founders that bootstrap large and small companies as well, to do something. I think just creating something that people want and that works as a business is such a great achievement. And however you do it, basically in whatever space. So I think it's really nice. It's obviously also nice to look at Google or Facebook and see what these companies have become, but we also have to understand they are complete outliers, like um, very, very rare. So yeah, if you had to give an advice to somebody who is now on the same like track and they are also like starting out, they are maybe even one step earlier, they have never founded a business. What would be something that you would think they should definitely think about?
That's such a good question. Okay, so if I had to distill it to like, what is the number one thing that I think people should focus on first, if you're at like the very, very beginning of your journey founding a company? And I kind of had to learn this the hard way. Like, it's important to say, like, I've had plenty of really dumb ideas that I like tried and didn't work, and was like, oh, okay, that didn't quite, that just didn't work, or I wasn't solving a problem. Number one thing I'd say before you even bother with like building anything, like putting anything together for a company, find a problem before. Like, you don't even think of it as a company. Literally be like, what is a problem that someone has that is so annoying for them, or like such a big problem that they would pay to have it solved? That is like, that is it. And build your company around that. And it's way more, I think, about that than like having some revolutionary, like world changing idea. I think that's pretty rare. And I actually think there's so much value to be created in just first finding a problem and creating a solution for that problem, assuming that group of people will pay for it. Like, full stop.
Yeah. And I think that's a big advantage in B2B actually. So if we look at once again like the Googles of this world, I think they oftentimes just started with a product and people loved it so much that it grew really fast. Like, and I think that's a really nice problem to have. But there are so many companies for like the one that didn't make it, basically, besides Google or Facebook, and so many competitors that are left in the dust. So I also think that a lot of times it's probably easier to look at B2B and to have a really clearly defined problem, ideally in a fast growing market. I think that seems to be a very interesting opportunity that to look at. So what is next actually then? So now you're at Calibre and you're starting to scale it basically. Are you are you trying to grow really fast? Are you in that stage already, or do you, or what's the next step basically that you see?
Great question. Our next step is definitely, we are like, as of pretty much this week, hitting all right, we're out of the like MVP part of the process, which is, it's great. It's been really important to develop it with users to like understand that we're solving a real problem. Um, but yeah, it's like we have a product, people can use it today. It works really, really well. And now our next problem in the face that we're entering is like, okay, how do we make sure that every single person who would use this tool, who has the problem that it solves, knows that it exists? Which is actually and again, like honing in on a really specific target has been my approach and our approach. And mentally, it's just so much easier for me to be like, okay, I don't have to, not everybody in the world needs to know this product exists. Only like this tiny, tiny group of people needs to know it exists. So a lot of what we're doing is purely growth, purely trying to like put this product in the hands of people that need it so that they know it's there. And a lot of what we're doing right now is like my approach. I don't really do a ton of the cold outreach so far. I think it's actually really effective, especially being in San Francisco. I think it's like really, really effective to kind of to directly and deeply integrate into the community. So like one thing we're doing, for example, is like we've sponsored a couple of hackathons for like specifically for agent builders. And so we'll run a track alongside something like Crew AI. So we're like, oh, we can kind of go directly to developers and teams building agents who already would be users of something like an agent framework like Crew AI and say, okay, you're using Crew AI, this is how you would use Caliber. Like we have an integration with them. So build your agent with both. And then it kind of it starts to like seed the product into the community in a very real way. And I think organic growth in like a very small group of people is oftentimes the best approach, at least for like my type of product. Maybe if you have kind of a consumer facing product, it might be different, but that's our approach right now. So getting the word out.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I think a good step, and I think always it's so nice to see like the first people use it at all. And then like taking one step at a time. Now have talked a lot about Caliber. When you use AI tools, what's your favorite right now? I'm actually also interested in that.
Claude. I don't even have to think about it. Yeah, I am like, at least lately, especially recently, I think Claude for me, I think it depends on the user. Some people, it depends what you're using the tool for. For me, Claude through and through is like, because I use it mostly for business. I'm not really there chatting to it like, hey, Claude, what's up? I use it purely for work. But for me, the change, like I was kind of split a little bit between like GPT, Claude. Obviously, Claude Code is an insane lift on engineering labor. It's like mind blowing the amount that we can get done in like one day. I'm like, I swear we did a month's worth of work in one day with Claude. Like it's mind blowing to me. And most of it's pretty good. And obviously you still need engineers to review it, but Claude Code absolutely like vital, I think, to most businesses in early growth stage. But beyond that, I think for me, Claude, just as a tool has become really useful. And the tipping point for me was when Claude enabled the ability to like search context within your other chats. To me, I was like, oh, this just made this like astronomically more useful than any other model. But that was just my personal like point at which I sort of became more loyal to Claude. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I would agree. So I started out with Cursor. I think many people did. Then I switched over to Claude Code. I'm also now they have an Excel add-in, for example, and these other add-ins that I find really well done. They are a lot better than the Microsoft alternatives, at least in my opinion. So even if I would look at like pure productivity tools, they are really doing a great job. And generally, I don't know why, but the brand feels sympathetic to me. So I don't know what it is, but they are doing something really right. So I would follow on that basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Devon, thank you so much. I think that was really nice final words. And to you listeners, thank you for being here and see you next time.
Thank you so